A week before Thanksgiving, I accidentally overheard a conversation that felt like my heart dropped into a pit. In my parents' kitchen in Boulder, I froze when I heard my mother speaking on the phone with my aunt. "Just bring all the kids over, Olivia will watch them upstairs. That way we adults can finally enjoy a peaceful dinner." That was it. After already making me handle the entire turkey and all the food for the whole extended family, they also planned to turn me into a reluctant babysitter for 10 children. I sat in silence the whole night, replaying all the years I had been expected to sacrifice weekends, Christmas, everything, never once treated as an equal member of the family. But this time, I decided to change things. I canceled the catering order, packed my suitcase, and flew to Seattle, where another family welcomed me with genuine warmth. And right at noon on Thanksgiving, when my mom called frantically asking, "Where are you? Everyone is waiting for you with the turkey." I just laughed and said, "Don't wait for me, and don't wait for the turkey either." Have you ever been treated by your own family as a servant instead of a real member? Tell me how you feel and let me know where you are listening from. Hi, my name is Olivia Carter. I am 28 years old and currently live in Denver, Colorado. I work as a marketing specialist for a fast-growing startup in the mobile app technology industry. My job is busy but full of challenges. I have a steady salary, my own apartment with a cozy little kitchen, and a spice cabinet always stocked so I can experiment with new recipes. Beyond work and cooking, I also love traveling, from road trips through Colorado's mountain towns to longer journeys across state lines. From the outside, my life looks perfect, independent, free, with a solid career and close friends always by my side. But every time I return to my family, all of that seems to lose its value. In the eyes of my parents and my sister, I am still the unmarried daughter without children, and for that reason, they assume I am the one with endless free time and energy to carry all the burdens they don't want or cannot handle. It is a label they have hung on me for years, a narrow view that makes everything I have built for myself appear invisible. My parents live in Boulder, about a 45-minute drive from Denver. Their two-story house, with a small garden in the front, has always been the gathering place for the entire extended family during the holidays. Relatives would come from everywhere: uncles, aunts, cousins, family friends. In theory, it was the picture of warmth and togetherness. But for me, that picture always came with a heavy fog. The unfair distribution of roles, the unspoken assumption that I was the one obligated to support everyone else. My daily life was already busy with work, but nearly every weekend I found myself pulled into my family's orbit, more specifically into my sister Melissa's. She is 6 years older than me and has 3 small children, 2 boys and a girl. The oldest is 8, the middle one 5, and the youngest just 3. At first, I didn't mind helping her out occasionally. I loved the kids, and I felt I could ease her load a little, especially when she complained about how overwhelming it was to juggle both her job and raising 3 children. But gradually, what began as an act of love and support turned into an unspoken obligation. Every Friday, my phone would buzz with a message from Melissa. "Olivia, I have to work late, can you pick up the kids?" Sometimes she wouldn't even bother to ask. She would just show up at my apartment door, drop off her 3 kids, and say hurriedly, "Watch them for a bit, I have something urgent." That bit usually stretched into the whole day, sometimes even overnight. And there I would be, staring at canceled plans with friends, skipping my yoga classes, and watching the little weekend trips I had carefully planned vanish into thin air. I had tried many times to have an honest conversation with Melissa. I remember one evening, after I had finally gotten her youngest to sleep, I took the chance to sit down with her. I gently explained that I needed time for myself too, that I couldn't keep watching her kids every single week. But the response I got was a sharp glare and a cutting remark. "You're so selfish, Olivia. You don't understand how hard it is to be a mother. You're still single, with nothing to worry about. Why can't you help your own sister?" I was speechless. In that moment, every argument I had carefully prepared seemed to dissolve. I wanted to say that I had my own responsibilities, that being single didn't mean I had no life of my own. But the look in her eyes, tired, accusing, made me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Little by little, I stopped trying to argue. Instead, I quietly carried the burden of weekends filled with the sound of children crying in place of the peaceful mornings I longed for. One time I tried to share my feelings with my parents during dinner in Boulder. I thought at least they would listen, that they would understand. But the moment I said, "I don't think I can keep watching the kids this often, I need time for myself too," my mother put down her spoon and replied in a reproachful tone, "Olivia, you don't have a family yet, so helping your sister is no problem. This is how you prepare for the future. When you get married and have children, you'll see these things are normal." My father nodded along, showing no concern for my feelings. I sat there between steaming plates of food feeling rejected once again. No one cared about how many plans I had to postpone, how many opportunities I missed simply because they assumed my life was empty and could be filled with obligations others didn't want to do. I began to realize a sad truth. In their eyes, my time had no value. They believed that only those with families and children were truly busy and therefore had the right to say no, while I was expected to be always available. I felt like a convenient void, a shadow that could be pulled out whenever needed. Even after a long week of work full of stressful marketing campaigns and endless meetings, my weekends were not for rest. They turned into unpaid shifts filled with crying, bickering children, and a sister who took for granted that I was her personal babysitter. That exhaustion kept building up. There were times I would lie on the sofa staring at the ceiling and wonder who I was living for. I had worked so hard to secure a stable job, to buy my small apartment with my own money, to live a life of freedom and independence, yet none of that was recognized within my family. To them, every achievement of mine was overshadowed by the fact that I was unmarried and childless. That label weighed heavier than any pressure from work because it came from the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. Gradually, I stopped looking forward to weekends. Instead of anticipating a short break to recharge, I dreaded the phone ringing and the sight of my sister's name on the screen. I hated the way my chest sank when I read the familiar message. "Olivia, can you help me out?" Worse, I hated myself for the many times I had nodded and said yes, turning myself into an extra person in someone else's life story. I began to see clearly that my time and effort were being taken for granted, that what I gave was never repaid with appreciation. That smoldering, persistent feeling became the seed of the change that would come later. A week before Thanksgiving, just as I stepped out of the office after a long day of back-to-back meetings, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering, sensing this wasn't going to be a simple call to check in. And I was right. Her voice came through, sweet yet firm. "Olivia, this year you'll handle the turkey and the main dishes for me. You have a steady job, a good salary, and you're single, with more free time than your sister. Melissa has 3 kids to juggle, you understand, don't you?" I froze outside the parking garage, gripping my phone as my hand trembled with anger, unable to find words. A part of me wanted to refuse, but the familiar echoes of duty and sacrifice rose in my mind again. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I forced out a calm reply. "Okay, I'll take care of it." When the call ended, I sat in my car, heart pounding as if I had just signed an invisible contract with no room for negotiation. Back at my apartment, instead of resting, I opened my laptop and immediately searched for the most reputable restaurant in Denver specializing in traditional Thanksgiving turkeys. I placed an order for a large roasted turkey with all the sides, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, even pumpkin pie. The total on the screen made me pause. It was nearly half my monthly rent. Still, I told myself, it's for family. After entering my credit card details and receiving the confirmation email, I sat motionless, the warm glow of the screen spilling across my face, while inside I felt a hollow space I couldn't name. I didn't know if I had just acted out of love or if it was nothing more than the result of years of quiet coercion. The more I thought about it, the more the unfairness burned inside me. This wasn't the first time I had dipped into my own pocket for the family. From birthday parties for the kids to Christmas gifts meant to help Melissa save money, I was always cast in the role of financial sponsor. But this time, being assigned to cover the entire turkey and catering for a massive family gathering simply because I was single, free, and had a steady income made me feel less like a family member and more like a walking wallet. I remembered the look in my mother's eyes when she said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if my life existed only to compensate for others. I had small dreams of my own, a short trip somewhere new, a cooking class I'd been eyeing, or simply a weekend with no interruptions. Yet none of that was ever considered. In their eyes, my life seemed to exist solely to fill the gaps they left behind. In the days that followed, whether at work or at home, I couldn't shake that feeling. Each time a colleague shared their Thanksgiving plans, some heading home for a warm reunion, others taking a short getaway with their partners and children, I forced a smile and hid the truth. The truth was, I was about to become the financier and server at my own family's holiday feast. I asked myself over and over, why wasn't I allowed to look forward to this holiday as a time to enjoy, but instead felt dread and heaviness? What had I done wrong to always be placed in such a diminished role? I had a job too. I worked 10-hour days too. I got tired and longed to rest just like anyone else. And yet, because I wasn't married, all of that was erased as if it didn't matter. There were evenings when I sat alone in my kitchen, preparing a simple meal with soft music playing in the background, yet my mind kept circling around the same thoughts. Was I born only to serve others? Is my worth measured solely by how much I can help my family? I looked around at the apartment I had bought on my own, every item arranged with my own hands, and the pride I once felt was now overshadowed by bitterness. Slowly, the truth came into focus. I wasn't a normal member of the family. I had been turned into a tool, a sponsor, and an unpaid babysitter. And when that realization hit me, a deep ache rose in my chest, as if I had lost myself long ago and was only now waking up to it. That Tuesday evening, just 2 days before Thanksgiving, I left the office later than usual. Winter light in Denver fades quickly, and by a little after 5, the road toward Boulder was already swallowed by dim yellow streetlights. I drove to my parents' house to drop off a few things. My mother had asked for some wine and fruit for the feast. To be honest, I wasn't looking forward to it, but I thought at least by getting it done, I could shorten the time I'd have to endure their criticism. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. Inside, light from the living room spilled into the hallway, and my mother's voice on the phone rang out clearly. I was about to step inside, but froze when I heard her say my name. "Just bring all the kids." My mother's voice was full of excitement, laced with relief. "Olivia will watch them upstairs. Then all of us can finally have a peaceful Thanksgiving dinner without chasing after the little ones." I froze where I stood. My heart pounded, each word cutting into me like a knife. At first I thought I had misheard, but then she went on, even clearer this time. "We'll turn the playroom on the second floor into the kids' area. With Olivia up there, no need to worry. She's young, strong, and since she doesn't have a family of her own, she has plenty of free time. Why shouldn't we ask her?" On the other end of the line, I heard Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, laugh. "Oh, that's perfect, then I don't have to worry. I've got 3 kids, and with everyone else's, that'll be 10 in total. If Olivia's taking care of all of them, we're set." Then the two of them burst into laughter, as if they had just come up with the most brilliant plan. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand gripping the bag of wine so tightly my fingers went numb. The words echoed in my head, 10 kids, for the entire dinner, while the adults ate, drank, and laughed as though I didn't even exist. I heard my mother continue with her instructions. "We'll bring over the play mats, a few boxes of Lego, and we'll lock the stairgate so the kids won't run downstairs. Olivia's used to watching Melissa's children, so taking care of a few more this time won't be a problem. She already ordered the turkey from that famous restaurant, so the dinner is guaranteed to be perfect." Her voice brimmed with confidence, as if I had signed a written contract. My chest tightened with pain. I wasn't just being turned into the sponsor of the dinner, now I was also expected to be the unpaid babysitter for all 10 children in the family. What shocked me most wasn't even the plan itself, but the way they talked about it, so casual, so certain, without a single moment of hesitation. Not one of them considered that I might say no. I stepped back a pace, my back hitting the wall without realizing it. Images of past moments flashed through my mind. Melissa dropping her kids at my door and walking away, my parents patting my shoulder and saying it was my duty, while I swallowed my tears and kept doing it because I didn't want to be seen as ungrateful. But this time felt different. I could see clearly that I had become nothing more than a tool, a domestic helper forced into service under the guise of family. All my freedom, effort, and money were treated as resources for the family to exploit. I wanted to go inside and confront them, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I didn't want to listen any longer, yet I couldn't bring myself to leave. Aunt Linda even joked, "Now we can relax with wine and conversation. No need to worry about the kids ruining the table and chairs." Lucky to have Olivia being unmarried really does have its perks. Their laughter rang out, bright and cruel. My vision blurred. I had never felt so distant from my own family. Finally, I took a deep breath, set the bag down on the small table in the hallway, and quietly walked back to my car. I left my parents' house that night with trembling hands. Driving back to Denver, the streetlights streaked by like blurred lines, and my chest was full of numb, choking emotions. Anger and humiliation twisted together in my ribs until it felt hard to breathe. Thinking of my mother and Aunt Linda laughing and gloating over their plan to turn me into the babysitter for a dozen children made my blood boil. Never before had I felt so disrespected. I wasn't only being turned into the wallet paying for the feast, I was being assigned to lock myself away upstairs with the kids while everyone downstairs ate, clinked glasses, and enjoyed themselves. In their imagination, I was nothing more than a serving tool, no more, no less. That night, when I arrived home to my apartment, I didn't even bother to turn on the lights. I collapsed onto the sofa and watched the darkness swallow the room. In that silence, memories of every time I had been taken advantage of surged back like a flood. I thought of the long weekends when Melissa dropped her 3 kids at my place and disappeared for the day. I remembered Christmases when I had hoped to enjoy a warm holiday, only to end up hunched over in the kitchen cleaning while everyone else gathered in the living room. I remembered last summer's trip to California that I'd planned with friends, which I canceled because Melissa urgently needed someone to watch the kids, and my parents convinced me that there will always be other chances to travel, but family can't be abandoned. Each memory felt like a needle in my heart, forcing me to face a harsh truth. For years I had given, and those sacrifices were never valued. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not only for sadness. They were the release of years of suppressed resentment, finally erupting. I felt as if I had lost myself by becoming the family's perpetual problem solver. I asked myself who I had been living for all this time. Why had I built this independent life if in the end I was still treated as the free one, always ready to serve others? A clear answer rang in my head. It was time to stop. I stood up, wiped my tears, and opened my laptop. In my inbox, the confirmation email for the catering order from the famous restaurant in Denver was still there. I remembered the amount I had spent, nearly half of this month's rent, and the anger in me flared even stronger. No, I would not let them benefit from me one more time. I clicked on the link in the email and chose Cancel Order. A warning popped up on the screen. Cancellation may incur a 15% fee. I stared at the number and gave a bitter smile. Losing a small fee was nothing compared to losing my self-respect. I confirmed the cancellation. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a notification that most of the payment would be refunded to my account within a few days. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking back control. Sitting quietly in my apartment, I suddenly remembered the invitation Rachel, my best friend from college, had given me a few weeks earlier. Rachel lived in Seattle with her husband and his family. She had said, "Olivia, if you don't want to be in Boulder this year, fly over here. My family always gathers at our lake house on Lake Washington for Thanksgiving. It's such a fun tradition. You'd love it." Back then, I just laughed it off, assuming that like every year, I would be trapped by family obligations. But now, sitting here, that invitation felt like a lifeline. I picked up my phone, hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed call. After a few rings, Rachel answered, her voice warm and full of cheer. "Olivia, I was just thinking about you. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Rachel, do you still have room for a surprise guest this Thanksgiving?" On the other end came her joyful shout. "Are you kidding? Of course we do. My whole family would love to have you. I'll get a room ready for you right away. Fly to Seattle, Olivia. This will be the first year you actually get to rest." Hearing her words was like having a heavy stone lifted off my chest. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time, gazing out the window as the season's first snowflakes drifted down. Inside me was a feeling both new and unfamiliar. Relief. I knew I had just made a decision that would change everything. I had rejected the role my family tried to force on me, and chosen my own path even if it was just the beginning. And this time, instead of letting others decide for me, I would decide my own happiness. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I had barely slept the night before, yet instead of exhaustion, a strange surge of energy coursed through me. I opened my computer, checked my weekly schedule, and typed out an email requesting an extra day off on Friday. I cited a short personal trip and a wish to fully enjoy the holiday break. My boss, a seasoned woman who always encouraged us to maintain balance in our lives, quickly approved. She even smiled and said, "Olivia, you deserve time for yourself. Don't forget to bring back photos to share with us." Her words felt like a soothing balm. At work, I was respected and treated like an adult. Yet, within my family, that kind of acknowledgement had never been given to me. At noon, I called the airline and booked a ticket to Seattle. Holiday fares were far higher than usual, but I didn't hesitate. Every click of the mouse, every number that appeared on the screen felt like a declaration that I was finally investing in myself. When I confirmed the Wednesday morning flight, my heart raced as if I had just signed a contract for freedom. That evening, I began to pack. I opened my closet and chose simple but warm clothes, thick sweaters, scarves, a wool coat. I laid them neatly in my suitcase, next to a book I hadn't yet had time to read, and my small camera to capture moments along the way. Then I paused in front of the apron hanging in the corner of my kitchen. It was the one I always wore when forced into the role of cooking for the entire family. I reached for it, thinking of folding it into my bag, but then stopped. No, I wouldn't bring it. I left it there as a reminder that this trip wasn't about serving anyone but myself. The days leading up to the holiday passed slowly, carrying a quiet tension. During the day, I focused on work, wrapping up unfinished projects so I could leave without worry. At night, I quietly picked up a few small gifts to bring to Seattle. A bottle of local wine, a box of handcrafted chocolates from my favorite shop. I pictured Rachel's delighted face when she received them, and warmth filled my chest. Yet alongside the excitement was a lingering unease. I had grown up with the tradition that Thanksgiving meant gathering at the Boulder house, being present whether I wanted to or not. The thought of being absent for the first time made me restless. How furious would my parents be? Would they call me ungrateful, accuse me of betrayal? The image of the whole family gathered together while I was somewhere else sent a chill through me. But then I asked myself, had I ever truly been part of those gatherings? Over the years, had I really sat at the table with everyone else, or was I always trapped in the kitchen or stuck with the kids? Had anyone ever asked me what I wanted to eat, where I wanted to sit, or was it always the unspoken orders, "Olivia, do this. Olivia, take care of that"? The more I thought about it, the more my worries began to fade. I realized that the tradition I was afraid of missing had never actually given me a sense of belonging. So what did I really have to lose? On the last night before leaving, I sat in my apartment with the soft glow of the lamp falling over my packed suitcase. I brewed a cup of hot tea, held it in my hands, and breathed in the sweet scent of chamomile. Outside, the winter wind howled through the window frame, and light snow drifted across the street. I looked at the scene and smiled. In that moment, I felt both fear and happiness. Fear, because it was the first time I dared to break away from my family's mold, the first time I faced the possibility of their anger and judgment. But happiness, because at last I had chosen myself. I was stepping out of the endless cycle of duty imposed by others, reaching for something simple that I had been missing all along: peace. Before bed, I switched my phone to silent mode, something I had rarely dared to do in the past. I wanted to wake up without interruptions, without hearing, "Olivia, don't forget to pick this up." Or, "Olivia, remember to handle that." I pulled the blanket over me, closed my eyes, and for the first time in days, I slept deeply. In my dreams, I was walking along a golden leaf-covered path in Seattle, laughter echoing ahead of me. And inside, a fragile yet steady belief began to grow. I was about to start a new journey, one where I could finally be myself, no longer just a shadow in my family. On the morning of November 22, I pulled my small suitcase through Denver Airport. The sky was just beginning to lighten, snow falling softly over the long rows of parked cars. My heart raced as I passed through security, not from nerves about the flight, but from the realization that I was leaving behind the cycle that had trapped me for so many years. The 2-hour flight passed quickly, and when the plane touched down in Seattle, the sky was a soft gray but the air was fresh, with tall evergreens rising through the mist. I wheeled my luggage out of the terminal and immediately spotted Rachel waving. She threw her arms around me, her bright smile washing away every lingering worry inside me. "Olivia, you really came. My family is going to be so excited," she exclaimed. I hugged her back, warmth spreading through me as if I had stepped into a completely different world. We drove for about an hour from the city to the suburbs along Lake Washington, where Rachel's family had a wooden lake house. The road wound through forests of pine and along deep blue waters reflecting the sky. When the car turned onto a narrow path, the house appeared among the trees. It was built from dark cedar wood, with a steep roof dusted in snow, windows glowing with golden light, and smoke curling up from the chimney. The sight made my chest tighten. It was simple, warm, and full of life. As we pulled in, the front door swung open. Rachel's parents, both in their 60s, along with her husband and 2 children, rushed out to greet me. "Welcome, Olivia," her mother said, hugging me tightly without a hint of hesitation. Rachel's husband shook my hand while the kids chattered excitedly, asking if I wanted to see their rooms. I was almost stunned by the warmth of it all. I wasn't treated like a guest, I was welcomed as though I were family returning home. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of cinnamon and butter. The living room was spacious, with high wooden ceilings, a green wreath hanging above, and a fireplace blazing with warmth. On the dining table, a wine-red cloth was spread neatly, a vase of golden sunflowers sat in the center, surrounded by gleaming white porcelain plates. I set down my suitcase, feeling as though I was being wrapped in a peace I had never known before. Rachel led me upstairs and opened the door to the guest room. A large bed covered with a soft wool blanket, a window facing the still lake where a few doves perched quietly. "This will be your room, Olivia. Treat it like your own home," Rachel said, her sincerity so overwhelming I had to bite my lip to keep the tears from spilling. That afternoon, as the whole family worked together to prepare dinner, I was amazed at how naturally tasks were shared. Rachel's father rolled up his sleeves to chop vegetables, her mother stirred a pot of pumpkin soup, Rachel handled dessert, and the kids folded napkins into little turkeys. I hesitated for a moment, expecting to be loaded with endless chores like back in Boulder. But instead, her mother smiled at me and said, "Olivia, you're our guest. Just pick whatever you'd enjoy helping with. No one is forcing you." I chose to slice fruit, a simple task, but one that allowed me to contribute without being diminished. When I finished, everyone praised me at once. "Olivia, you're so skillful." Such simple words, yet ones I had never once heard from my own family. That evening, when the family gathered around the table, I sat between Rachel and her mother. On the table was a golden roasted turkey, rich gravy, smooth mashed potatoes. But what struck me most wasn't the food, it was the way everyone spoke. They went around sharing what they were thankful for that year. A new job, good health, a successful semester. When it was my turn, I hesitated and finally said, "I'm grateful to be here today." The whole table clapped, and Rachel squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with understanding. My throat tightened. For the first time, I wasn't treated as an outsider. I wasn't a babysitter, I wasn't the wallet. I was simply Olivia, a person who was heard and valued. After dinner, we gathered around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa. The conversations drifted between childhood memories, old games, and dreams for the future. I sat there, listening to the laughter, watching the firelight dance across everyone's faces. A rare sense of peace settled over me. I realized I had spent too many years chasing after acceptance that my own family would never give. Yet here, simply by stepping outside of that cycle, I had found a place where I truly belonged. That night, lying in the warm guest room with a view of the lake, I listened to the gentle wind blowing through the pine trees. I smiled to myself. For the first time in many years, I felt like I finally had a home for Thanksgiving. By noon on Thanksgiving Day, the lake house was alive with laughter. Rachel's mother was teaching the children how to fold paper cranes, the smell of roasting turkey filled the air, and I sat in the living room with a cup of hot cocoa in my hands, my heart light and calm. Just then, my phone began to vibrate. On the screen flashed the familiar words, "Mom calling." I let it ring, my heart twinning slightly but my mind steady. A moment later, it stopped only to ring again. "Dad calling." I drew in a deep breath and pressed the silence button. But the calls didn't stop. 10 minutes later, as the clock struck exactly noon, the ringtone pierced the air again, this time from my mother, accompanied by a frantic message, "Olivia, where are you? Everyone is waiting for you with the turkey. Hurry, don't let the whole family lose face." How? I sat up straight, knowing I couldn't avoid it forever. I pressed answer and lifted the phone to my ear. My mother's voice burst through immediately, sharp and impatient. "Olivia, where are you? The guests are all here, the whole family is waiting for you to bring the turkey. How dare you be late like this? This is your responsibility." I kept my voice calm, so calm, it surprised me. "Mom, don't wait for me. I'm not coming. And I'm not bringing the turkey." "Oh." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then an explosion. "What? What did you just say? Everyone is counting on you. How can you abandon your family like this?" I tightened my grip on the cup of cocoa in my hand and answered slowly. "Mom, I heard your call with Aunt Linda on Tuesday. I know all about the plan to turn me into a babysitter for 10 kids upstairs while the adults ate downstairs. I won't be part of that anymore." "Habu?" Her voice shot up, furious. "You were eavesdropping? You are so selfish. All we wanted was one peaceful dinner. Is that so wrong? You're not married, you should be the one to sacrifice for your family." Before I could reply, my father snatched the phone. His voice was lower, but just as harsh. "Olivia, you've humiliated this family. Everyone is watching us, the guests are wondering where the turkey is. Do you want people to think we don't know how to host? You've shamed your parents completely." Listening to him, I didn't feel the sting I once would have. Instead, I almost laughed at how their concern was always about appearances, never about my feelings. My reply was crisp. "I haven't humiliated anyone. I'm simply refusing to be taken advantage of again. If you feel ashamed, it's because your plan was flawed, not because of me. Ivan." Then Melissa's voice cut in, dripping with contempt. "Oh my God, Olivia, you're unbelievable. I'm busy with the kids, Mom and Dad are getting older, and all you had to do was help a little. But you can't even do that, you're so selfish, always thinking only of yourself. No wonder you're still single, no one could put up with that attitude." Her words stabbed like knives, but I was ready for them. I drew in a deep breath and answered firmly. "Melissa, don't twist the truth. For years I've sacrificed for you and your kids, weekends, holidays, even Christmas. I've lost countless hours and opportunities because of your endless demands. And not once have I heard a thank you. Only more blame. So this time, I'm saying enough. On the other end of the line, the air seemed to tighten, and then my mother broke into sobs. "If you do this, the family will fall apart. Don't you think about your parents? Don't you think about your relatives?" I closed my eyes, letting the tears gather, but my voice didn't shake. "Mom, family doesn't mean turning one person into an unpaid servant." I canceled the turkey order. I have no responsibility left in Boulder. And right now, I'm sitting in a home where I'm respected, where I'm treated as real family. I'm going to enjoy this Thanksgiving my way. I looked around. Rachel sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of encouragement. The fireplace burned brightly, the smell of turkey filled the air, and the laughter of people who shared no blood with me wrapped me in a sense of belonging I had never felt before. When I ended the call and set my phone down on the wooden table in Rachel's living room, a strange peace washed over me. I knew that in Boulder, the scene unfolding was the complete opposite. My mother was likely running frantically around the kitchen, her face flushed with anger and worry, while guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. There was no turkey, the table was missing its centerpiece dish, and the relatives so used to a picture-perfect feast were beginning to murmur their complaints. Upstairs, 10 children screamed and ran wild without anyone to contain them. Melissa was probably struggling to control her 3 kids while loudly blaming me to anyone willing to listen. My father, no doubt, stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, his forced voice trying to smooth things over, but every explanation only spreading more irritation. Some guests probably forced polite smiles, but I could clearly imagine Aunt Linda sighing with folded arms, and a few hot-tempered uncles shaking their heads, muttering, "Never seen a Thanksgiving this chaotic." Then, one by one, they stood, making excuses to leave early, abandoning the heavy air inside the house once proudly called the center of family unity. It felt like 2 films were playing in my head at once. On one side, Boulder in complete chaos, and on the other, here in Seattle, where I sat in the warm circle of people who shared no blood with me. On the table before us, a golden roasted turkey sat proudly in the center, surrounded by mashed potatoes, stuffing, pumpkin soup, roasted vegetables, and the sweet aroma of apple pies. Candlelight flickered, reflecting off the joyful faces around me. No one shouted, no one scolded. Instead, every story was listened to with care. Rachel's mother asked me about my marketing work in Denver, her eyes filled with genuine interest rather than judgment. Rachel's husband shared a childhood memory of fishing with his father on the very lake outside, his voice light-hearted and warm. After finishing their meals, the children were allowed to bring toys into their playroom, occasionally running out to show off their Lego creations, instantly met with praise and gentle guidance. No one was forced, no one had to sacrifice. Everything flowed smoothly, harmoniously, like a soft melody. As I ate, I couldn't stop comparing the 2 worlds. In Boulder, I was certain my mother was still scolding my father for not managing the situation. Melissa was shouting that Olivia is so selfish, while the children cried in exhaustion from being neglected. That atmosphere could never truly be called a family gathering. It was nothing more than a broken play where everyone tried to save face while exposing their selfishness and disregard for one another. In contrast, here in Seattle, I sat at a table where, for the first time, I was simply myself. I was part of a dinner where my presence wasn't tied to heavy responsibilities, wasn't paid for with money or labor. I was part of the joy, not the burden. After dinner, everyone gathered in the living room, stoking the fire in the hearth. The children sat around a small table playing board games, while the adults split into teams for a trivia game about American history and culture. Rachel pulled me onto her team, and when I answered a tough question correctly, the whole group cheered. I laughed, surprised at how light I felt. No one mocked me with, "You must have too much free time to know things like that." No one treated me as an outsider. I was simply a friend, a guest who was respected. I leaned back on the sofa, soaking in the warmth of the fire, listening to laughter echo through the wooden house, and suddenly realized this was the image I had always longed for whenever I thought of family. Meanwhile, in Boulder, I knew the evening was unraveling. Guests who were dissatisfied would start leaving, and the dinner would be declared a failure. My parents would lament that this year was the greatest embarrassment, while Melissa would keep throwing blame at me. The irony was sharp. By trying to exploit me to protect their pride, they had only destroyed it, and I, the one they pushed aside, was living the most peaceful holiday of my life. As night fell in Seattle, I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the lake shimmering with moonlight. The cold air brushed my face, yet my heart felt inexplicably warm. I thought of the chaos in Boulder, and felt no pain, only clarity at the stark contrast. One side was chaos, fed by selfishness and exploitation. The other was peace, built on respect and love. And I knew then my choice had led me exactly where I belonged. For the first time in years, I no longer felt trapped in a cycle. I had found a place to belong, not defined by blood, but by genuine respect. 3 days after Thanksgiving, when I had just returned from Seattle, my Denver apartment still carried faint traces of cinnamon and vanilla from the gifts Rachel had sent with me. I had just experienced one of the most beautiful holidays of my life, but that sense of peace didn't last long. That afternoon, a heavy knocking rattled my door. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward to open it. Standing there were my parents and Melissa, their familiar faces drawn so tight they were nearly unrecognizable. Without a greeting, they marched straight into the living room and dropped onto the sofa as if the place still belonged to them. My mother spoke first. Her voice shook, half reproach and half accusation. "Olivia, do you realize what you've done? The whole family fell apart because of you. This Thanksgiving was a disaster. Everyone was waiting for you at the turkey, and when they realized you weren't coming, the guests left, the kids ran wild, the house was chaos. We've never been so humiliated." My father followed, his eyes stern. "People will say we don't know how to raise our children. You turned us into a laughingstock in front of the entire family." I listened, strangely calm. After my days in Seattle, I had gained enough distance not to fall back into the old, familiar guilt. I set my teacup on the table, looked them directly in the eyes, and spoke slowly. "Mom, Dad, this wasn't my fault. It was the consequence of the plan you and Aunt Linda made behind my back. I heard everything. You intended to make me the babysitter for 10 children while everyone else downstairs ate and laughed. I am no longer a child you can order around like that." Melissa scoffed, folding her arms. "Oh my God, Olivia, you're still playing the victim. Do you know how hard I've worked? Do you know what it's like to juggle 3 small children? I only asked you to sacrifice one day and you couldn't even do that. You're so selfish." I turned to her, my voice steady and no longer trembling. "Melissa, for many years I've sacrificed far more than one day. I missed holidays, canceled trips, gave up my weekends to watch your children, cleaned up after parties, and cooked for everyone. But not once did I hear a thank you. Only more demands and blame. So, this time, I choose to stop." The room felt thick and heavy. My mother began to cry, gripping the edge of the sofa. "How can you say that? Family means yielding, it means sacrificing for one another. If everyone thought like you, what would become of this family?" I inhaled deeply and answered firmly. "Mom, family does not mean turning someone into free labor. I have a life, limits, and my own worth. I have been silent for too long, and that silence only made people look down on me more. Now it's enough." Doubly. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp and commanding. "If you keep this attitude, don't blame us when we cut you off. Don't expect any help or love from this family again." I looked him straight in the eye, my chest tightening, but the words that left my mouth were ones I hadn't even known I carried. "If that's the price of living as a free person, then I accept it. I've had enough, Dad. I don't need a kind of love that only exists when I obey." My words rang out with finality, leaving all 3 of them stunned. Melissa's eyes widened, my mother sobbed harder, and my father's face flushed red as he fell silent. No one spoke again. At last, my father stood, tugging my mother toward the door. Melissa shot me a furious glare before storming out behind them. The door slammed shut, leaving behind a hollow echo in my small apartment. I sank into the chair, listening to the thud of my heartbeat. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt for disappointing them. I felt relief, as if a heavy chain had finally been broken. I knew this decision would change my relationship with my family forever. But in that moment, I also knew I had finally grown up. I was no longer bound by their expectations or the weight of imposed guilt. I had chosen my own path, and for the very first time, I felt free. After that tense confrontation, I made a decision. I would no longer let myself slip back into the old cycle of guilt. I picked up my phone, opened my contacts, and blocked my mother, my father, and Melissa. It was just a small action on a screen, but for me it felt like building a gate of protection, one that kept me from being dragged into more calls full of reproach, more demanding texts, more endless loops with no escape. I didn't do it out of anger but out of clarity. I needed quiet to rebuild my own life, without my time and energy being drained by people who only saw me as a resource to exploit. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself back into work. I accepted a new project at my company, and for the first time, I could give it my full attention without worrying about being summoned to babysit on the weekends. I also began reclaiming the little things I had once neglected. Brewing coffee slowly in the mornings, practicing yoga in the early sunlight, or wandering through a bookstore in the afternoons, picking out a novel I wanted to read instead of the children's books Melissa used to ask me to pick up. Each day, I felt myself slowly healing from within, like a garden being tended to after years of neglect. One evening, Rachel called me, her voice bubbling with joy. "Olivia, that holiday was wonderful. My family still talks about you, and the kids keep asking when Aunt Olivia will come back." Hearing that, I smiled as warmth spread through me. I realized I had found another kind of family, not one bound by blood, but one built on respect and genuine affection. They didn't need me to sacrifice in order to prove love. They only needed me to be truly present. As my spirit began to settle, I also started opening myself up to new connections. A colleague I often saw at the gym, after many casual conversations, invited me out to dinner. I agreed, and the date turned out to be simple but genuine. He didn't ask me, "So when are you getting married?" He didn't judge me for living alone. Instead, he listened with interest as I talked about my love for traveling, my career plans, and even asked to learn a few of my favorite recipes. I realized then that the world was full of people who could see and appreciate me as an independent person, not as a tool to serve someone else's needs. Looking back on the road I've traveled, I've taken away a hard-earned lesson that I want to share with anyone listening. Family does not mean you must accept being taken advantage of. True kinship never turns you into the one who carries everything while being neglected yourself. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is an act of self-love. When you dare to say no to unfair demands, you are saying yes to your own worth and peace of mind. I know some may hear this and think I am too harsh, that I should forgive. But forgiveness does not mean allowing yourself to be hurt again. Sometimes forgiveness is letting go of the expectation that they will ever change. And I have chosen to let go. Because I deserve to be with people who truly value me, not those who only look for ways to use me. One evening, in early December, as Denver lay blanketed in the season's first snow, I stood by my apartment window watching the flakes drift gently outside. The streetlights shimmered against the white ground, creating a quiet, breathtaking scene. Holding a cup of hot cocoa in my hands, I smiled softly. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not the halfway kind of freedom that comes from a few days of rest before returning to sacrifice, but true freedom, the freedom of someone who had dared to set boundaries, dared to choose herself, dared to step out of the endless cycle of being used. And in that moment, I knew my journey was only beginning. But unlike before, this time I was moving forward without the weight on my shoulders, walking with light steps toward a future where I could finally be myself, whole and happy. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again in the next stories released daily here on Familial Stories Exposed.